Elves. The Elves are the firstborn children of Ilúvatar, the oldest speaking race in Middle-earth, and everything about them feels like a reminder that the world was once grander than it is now. Immortal unless slain in battle or broken by grief, their souls return to the Halls of Mandos in Valinor and can eventually be rehoused, meaning even death is not quite death for them, which is either a gift or a curse depending on how you look at it. Over thousands of years, they built the greatest civilizations Middle-earth has ever seen. The hidden kingdom of Rivendell under Elrond, the golden forest of Lothlorien under Galadriel, and the ancient underground halls of Mirkwood under Thranduil. The three elven rings of power, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, were forged by Celebrimbor and used to preserve and protect these realms against the decay of time. But despite all that power and all that beauty, the elves are leaving. Their time is ending. As the dominion of men rises, the elves grow thinner in the world, fading from it like a light slowly going out. The ships sail west from the Grey Havens, carrying the last of them to the undying lands, and Middle-earth becomes a little less magical every time one departs. Vanyar. The Vanyar are the first and smallest of the three great kindreds of the Eldar, and almost nobody in the main story of The Lord of the Rings ever mentions them, because they never came back. Led by Ingwe, High King of all elves, the Vanyar made the westward journey to Valinor, settled close to the Valar, on the slopes beneath Taniqatil, the highest mountain in the world, and essentially stayed there. Golden-haired and considered the most spiritually pure of all elvish peoples, they were so content in the presence of the divine that they had no desire to return to Middle-earth. While the Noldor rebelled and the Sindar built kingdoms in dark forests, the Vanyar remained in the light. Their story is almost entirely contained within the Silmarillion, which means most people who only know the films have never heard of them. They are the elves who made the right choice, or at least the safe one, and their quiet absence from the main narrative is its own kind of statement about what peace costs. Noldor. The Noldor are the Deep Elves, and they are responsible for more of Middle-earth's history, glorious and catastrophic, than any other single people. Their greatest craftsman, Feanor, created the Silmarils, three jewels containing the light of the two trees of Valinor, and when Morgoth stole them, Feanor led a rebellion against the Valar themselves, dragging his people back into Middle-earth on an oath of vengeance that cursed his entire house. The fallout from that decision echoes across thousands of years of war, betrayal, and loss. By the Third Age, the Noldor are few and diminished, but their fingerprints are everywhere. Celebrimbor, a Noldoran smith working in a region, forged the Rings of Power around the year 1500 of the Second Age. Elrond is of Noldoran descent. Galadriel, one of the greatest elves alive, is partly Noldoran. The Noldor are what happens when extraordinary intelligence and passion exist without the wisdom to restrain them. Brilliant, tragic, and impossible to look away from. Sindar. The Sindar, or Grey Elves, are the Telerin elves who stopped short of completing the westward journey to Valinor. They never received the full light of the trees, which technically makes them a lower tier of elvish nobility, but in practical terms, they were the dominant elves of Middle-earth for most of its history. Under Thingol, they built Doriath. Under Thranduil, they hold the woodland realm of Mirkwood right through the events of The Lord of the Rings. When you hear Elvish spoken in the films, that's Sindarin, their language, the most widely used Elvish tongue across all of Middle-earth. Legolas is Sindarin. His father, Thranduil, is Sindarin. They are, in many ways, the face of elvenkind that the wider world actually encounters. Proud, ancient, beautiful, and occasionally difficult guests to have at any diplomatic table. Sylvan Elves. The Sylvan Elves, sometimes called Wood Elves, are the elves who never made the great westward journey at all. They settled deep in Middle-earth's forests and stayed there, developing a culture far more earthbound and wild than their Eldar cousins. Less interested in craft and lore, more interested in archery, hunting, and the deep rhythms of the forest, They populated both Lothlorien and Mirkwood in large numbers, though notably, both kingdoms are actually governed by non-Sylvan rulers, Galadriel and Thranduil respectively, who are of higher elvish lineage. The Sylvan elves are descended from the Nandor, those who split from the Teleri during the Great Westward March and turned back. They are the most mortal feeling of all elves, the least touched by the divine light of Valinor, and in some ways the most alive because of it, rooted in the world rather than already half departed from it. Dwarves. The dwarves were not supposed to exist. The Vala Aule, impatient for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar, secretly created the 7 dwarf fathers in the deep of the world. And when Ilúvatar discovered this, rather than unmake them, he adopted them as his own children, putting them to sleep until after the elves awoke. Each of those 7 fathers founded one of the 7 houses of the dwarves, and each eventually received a ring of power from Sauron. Unlike men, the dwarves couldn't be enslaved by their rings, but the rings bred in them an insatiable hunger for gold and treasure that destroyed more than one kingdom. The greatest of all dwarf realms was Khazad-dûm, later called Moria, vast beyond imagining, lit by forges and lantern chains deep beneath the misty mountains, until a Balrog was unearthed, and the dwarves had to abandon it. Gimli, son of Glóin, carries that entire history on his shoulders when he walks into Moria with the Fellowship and finds nothing but silence and bones. Hobbits. Hobbits appear nowhere in the ancient histories of Middle-earth, showing up almost unannounced in the Third Age as a quiet branch of mankind nobody paid much attention to, which turned out to be exactly what saved the world. 3 varieties exist: the Harfoots, the most common and traditionally nomadic; the Stoors, broader built and comfortable near water; and the Fallowhides, slightly taller and more adventurous, from whom both the Tooks and the Brandybucks descend. They come of age at 33, live comfortably to around 100 years old, and want almost nothing beyond a good meal, a warm fire, and minimal disruption to their schedules. Their extraordinary resistance to the One Ring appears to come from precisely that quality: no ambition, no hunger for power, nothing for the ring to grab onto. Tolkien's point is uncomfortable and deliberate. The fate of the entire world depended on finding someone who didn't want anything from it. Men. Men are the second children of Ilúvatar, and they received what the Valar call the gift of men and the elves call privately something closer to a mercy, mortality. Unlike elves, when men die, their souls leave the world entirely, going somewhere even the Valar cannot see, which either makes death a liberation or the most terrifying unknown in all of creation, depending on how you sit with it. They are the most diverse race in Middle-earth by far, spreading from the horse plains of Rohan to the sun-scorched south of Harad, from the men of the frozen north to the seafaring kingdoms of Gondor. 9 of their greatest kings accepted rings from Sauron and were slowly hollowed out over centuries, becoming the Nazgûl, neither alive nor dead, entirely enslaved to the ring. The Fourth Age belongs to men, not because they earned it more than the elves, but because that was always the design. Númenóreans. The Númenóreans were the greatest civilization men ever built, and they destroyed it themselves. After the defeat of Morgoth at the end of the First Age, the men who had allied with the Valar were gifted the island of Númenor, sitting in the sea between Middle-earth and Valinor, and given lifespans stretching to 300 or even 500 years. For centuries they were magnificent, explorers, scholars, builders, the most powerful seafarers the world had seen. Then their lives began to feel short anyway. Sauron, brought to Númenor as a prisoner, spent decades whispering the same lie into increasingly willing ears. Sail to Valinor, claim immortality. The Valar are keeping it from you. King Ar-Pharazôn eventually did exactly that, leading a fleet to the Undying Lands in an act of open war against the Divine. Ilúvatar's response was to drown the entire island and reshape the world so it was no longer flat. So no ship could ever sail to Valinor again. The survivors, Elendil and his sons among them, landed in Middle-earth and founded Gondor and Arnor. It's a long way down from paradise. Rohirrim. The Rohirrim are men of the Horse Plains, descended from the Eotheod of the north, and given the land of Rohan by Gondor around the year 2510 of the Third Age. Their entire culture orbits the horse. In war, in ceremony, in the names they give their children and their kings. Tolkien modeled them deliberately on the Anglo-Saxons, and their language Rohirric is represented in the books through Old English. So when you read the names Theoden, Eomer, and Eowyn, you're reading a constructed linguistic cousin of the word England itself. They are less burdened than Gondor by the weight of fallen greatness, more direct, more emotional, more willing to ride into an unwinnable battle at dawn because it's the right thing to do. That directness reaches its peak with Eowyn, a shield maiden who rides to the Pelennor fields in disguise and kills the Witch King, an act only possible because the ancient prophecy specified no living man, and she is neither. Tolkien built an entire civilization just to make that moment work. Orcs. Orcs are the dark foundation of Sauron's armies, and according to the most widely accepted reading of Tolkien's writings, they began as elves, the Firstborn, captured by Morgoth in the darkness of the First Age, broken apart and twisted over long generations into something unrecognizable. Tolkien himself found this deeply troubling and never fully resolved it. His letters show him wrestling with whether orcs could have free will, whether they had souls, whether a race built entirely for evil could exist without making his moral universe incoherent. In practice, they are brutal, hierarchical, terrified of their own commanders, and incapable of creation. Everything they build is designed to destroy. Several subbreeds exist. The common orcs of Mordor, who hate sunlight, the larger cave-dwelling orcs of Moria, and the Uruk-hai, Saruman's engineered upgrade. Their weakness to daylight is treated almost as comedy in The Hobbit. By the time they're pouring through the gates of Minas Tirith, it isn't funny at all. Uruk-hai. The Uruk-hai are what happens when the blunt instrument of the orc is given an engineering upgrade. Larger, stronger, and, crucially, capable of moving in daylight without weakening. They represent a fundamental shift in what Sauron and Saruman can field in open warfare. Saruman bred or enhanced them at Isengard, turning an ancient forest stronghold into something that looks closer to a factory than a fortress. Fires, machinery, pits, and thousands of Uruks being prepared for war. The contrast with Fangorn Forest, directly next door, is deliberate. Tolkien was a man who loved trees and distrusted industry, and Isengard is his nightmare image of what industry looks like when it has no conscience. The Uruk-hai assault on Helm's Deep pits 10,000 of them against a garrison of farmers, old men, and boys, and the only thing standing between that and total annihilation is a wall, a wizard, and 500 riders arriving at sunrise. Trolls. Trolls are widely believed to be Morgoth's dark parody of Ents, created as a grotesque counter to the shepherds of the trees. Large, destructive, and incapable of the patience or wisdom that Ents embody. In their original form, they turn to stone in sunlight, a weakness that makes them useless for large-scale daytime warfare and provides one of the Hobbit's few moments of genuine comic relief when Gandalf keeps Bert, William, and Tom arguing until dawn. By the War of the Ring, that joke has a much darker update. Sauron bred the Olog-hai, according to Tolkien's appendices, a strain of trolls who do not petrify in sunlight and are both intelligent and heavily armored. A cave troll in Moria nearly kills Frodo. Olog-hai fight at the Black Gate. The same creature that was outsmarted by a wizard stalling for time has become something that charges the armies of the West without flinching. That progression tells you a great deal about how the threat level has changed. Ents. The Ents are the shepherds of the trees, and according to Tolkien, they exist because Yavanna, Vala of growing things, asked for something to protect the forests from the axes of dwarves and men. They are, by any measure, ancient. Treebeard introduces himself as the oldest living creature in Middle-earth. They speak the slowest language in existence. Tolkien wrote that they never say anything unless it is worth taking a long time to say, which means an entmoot, a gathering to reach a decision, takes days. The tragedy underneath their thunderous assault on Isengard is that they are a dying people. The Entwives left long ago, seeking cultivated and ordered lands rather than wild forests, and the Ents have been searching for them ever since without success. Tolkien said in his letters that he did not himself know what became of the Entwives. Treebeard knows his kind is fading. He destroys Isengard anyway. That is perhaps the most quietly devastating piece of heroism in the entire story. Eagles. The great eagles are not simply enormous birds. They are servants of Manwë, king of the Valar, beings of immense intelligence and purpose who act as messengers and instruments of divine will. And they intervene in the history of Middle-earth only when the moment genuinely demands it. This is why the question, why didn't the eagles just fly the ring to Mordor, fundamentally misreads what they are. They are not a taxi service. They are a last resort. Their leader in the Third Age is Gwaihir the Windlord, though the greatest eagle ever was Thorondor of the First Age, whose wingspan was measured in fathoms, and who rescued Fingolfin's body from Morgoth's grasp after the High King fell in single combat. The eagles pull Gandalf off the peak of Orthanc. They turn the Battle of Five Armies. They carry Frodo and Sam from the slopes of Mount Doom when the mission is done. Every time they appear, the story is at a point where no mortal solution remains. Maiar. The Maiar are the second tier of divine beings below the Valar, spirits who entered the world at its shaping and took on roles and forms suited to their nature. And the most important thing to understand about them is how many of the story's central figures actually are Maiar, without it being obvious. Gandalf is a Maia named Aloran, sent from Valinor in mortal form, specifically to inspire resistance to Sauron, rather than to use his own power to simply defeat him. Saruman is a Maia named Curunir. Radagast is a Maia. The two blue wizards, named Alatar and Palando in Unfinished Tales, though Tolkien also referred to them as Morinatar and Romastamo in later notes, went east, and their fate is uncertain. Sauron is a Maia, a servant of Aule before Morgoth corrupted him, which makes him a direct spiritual peer of Gandalf. The Balrogs are Maiar too, fallen fire spirits, of which Durin's Bane in Moria is one. Good and evil in this world did not come from different sources. They came from the same place, Valar. The Valar are the 14 great powers who entered the world at its creation to shape it according to Ilúvatar's design. Or 15 if you count Morgoth, which you should, because understanding that the greatest evil in the history of Middle-earth was also the most powerful and gifted of the Valar is essential to understanding the scale of everything that follows. Each Vala holds a domain. Manwë governs wind and sky. Ulmo governs all water. Aule governs craft and stone. Yavanna governs growing things. Mandos holds the fate of all souls. They are not remote or abstract gods. Tolkien modeled them partly on the Norse and Greek pantheons, giving them personalities, conflicts, and relationships. But their direct intervention in the world decreased over time, partly by choice and partly by design. And by the Third Age, they are almost entirely absent from the story, except as distant presences whose decisions centuries ago are still shaping everything happening now. Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is, by Tolkien's own explicit statement, an enigma, and intentionally so. He predates the Valar's shaping of the world, refers to himself as eldest and fatherless, and the One Ring has absolutely no effect on him. He can put it on without turning invisible. He can see Frodo while Frodo wears it. And when the Council of Elrond considered making him the ring-bearer, Gandalf's conclusion was that Tom would simply lose it eventually, because he would forget it. It holds no meaning for him whatsoever. He is not good in any moral sense the story normally uses. He is simply outside the entire moral framework. Tolkien wrote in letter 144 that Tom represents something that must exist in a complete world, the spirit of pure, unanxious joy in existence, something that belongs to itself and cannot be claimed or corrupted. Every other being in Middle-earth is defined by what they want. Tom Bombadil wants nothing. That makes him either the freest creature alive or the strangest, and possibly both. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.